Hello. One of the core skills in this course we develop is decision-making skill. Making decisions about diversity management is not easy. That is why the main focus in this video lecture is on making decisions related to diversity management in the organizations and the outcomes of these decisions on various diversity management tools. We will look at the things like what aspects may hinder organizations to make their decisions to be inclusive or to address diversity management more generally, how diversity management related decisions are affected if company operates internationally, how to make fair decisions while creating diversity management policies and procedures in the organization, and how to create policies and procedures in the organization which would make organization proactive in diversity management, inclusive, and the one which is providing equal opportunities for everyone. But first of all, let's look at why organizations may not consider importance of diversity management. Because opponents may claim that business is making business, right? So business is not an NGO or charity organization. Business should focus on profit, not on social justice. These are sort of rather rough arguments against engagement in diversity management with a social justice approach. However, opponents have what to say against the business case in diversity management too. So desire for good business frequently allows ignoring diversity management. So consider one of the examples, like integrating disabled employees or providing flexible working hours for parents requires extra costs, and therefore organization may wish to avoid them. Another example could be, for example, that hiring man manager is really less risky than hiring a woman manager, because no man can ever get pregnant, but woman can, even if she is not considering that option. Furthermore, methods to effectively measure diversity management benefits to business remains a challenge. If we can measure, for example, increase of specific customer amount after hiring certain minority group to serve those specific customers, how to measure, for example, effects of flexible working hours, our arrangements. And finally, many benefits of diversity management are revealed in long term, while business is frequently evaluated by short-term financial performance. So seeking short-term financial appraisals, stock market performance results, etc., usually have rather detrimental effects on willingness to engage in diversity management. In family-owned or limited companies, which are not on stock exchange or do not have majority shares owned by, for example, investment companies, the interest to utilize long-term diversity management benefits and therefore their willingness to take a risk in doing diversity management related investments might be higher. So if we ever get to sell diversity management initiatives or new policy for a company, these things need to be addressed in your argumentation in order to be convincing and really sort of business oriented. Now let's look at why MNCs may have much harder challenges while designing and implementing diversity management policies. Designing diversity management policy for indigenous firm and a multinational corporation or MNC is likely to be different. Then why? First of all, each country has diverse type and extent of legislations to address diversity management related issues in organizations. So, for example, homosexuality is still illegal in a number of countries. Or the other example, even within the EU, for example, European Union, there are varying legal requirements. So, for example, parental leave in France is only 3 months, while in Central and Eastern Europe or Nordics, it may last for 2 to 3 years. What makes the problem of different legislations bigger is different social evaluations of these legislations and norms upon which diversity management is designed. Consider one example. So let's say a company designed its diversity management policy based on French social norms, and they comply to local country laws but encourages women in their multinational corporation to get back to work as early as possible, because that reflects equal rights for women's professional life. Right, so the value is before that, or the norm before that, is sort of encouragement of women's professional career and development. Indeed, very short maternity leave in France is widely accepted and promoted by women due to strong feminist movement in the country. Yet, the same decision in many Central and Eastern European countries about the short parental leave might be seen as disrespect for the women and their need to deliver family duties. So this is one of the examples. Then in countries which with little legal requirements about how to integrate, for instance, disabled people or support employees with family responsibilities, diversity management policy which addresses those issues may be seen extremely positively. Whereas in countries where legal environment has already solved those issues, diversity management policy may be seen simply as compliance to the law and nothing else. So for the company which operates in multiple legal environments, in this situation creates a large challenge in communication about diversity management choices and building consistent image as employer internationally. There is also the case that in very liberal economies like the USA or the UK, country-level legislations may be seen as secondary. In such liberal economies, in many occasions, business itself takes a lead in making social changes. However, in more state-regulated economies, for example, like Nordic countries, companies are used to have country-level legislations or recommendations or directives, and therefore they may prefer country-level recommendations and locally established norms rather than certain corporate initiatives. Finally, the way each country or culture has enacted the legislations and organizational policies and procedures may be different. So, for example, we know that not all countries stick to the law, and also there might be legislations which are ignored, weak, or might have loopholes and similar things. And subsidiaries residing in such environments are likely to follow practices usual in that country. On the other hand, there are countries where country legal environment is very strong and usually followed, for example, in Finland. But many organizational systems can be frequently implemented informally. So consider this example. Frequently in Finland, performance appraisal or minutes of meetings about certain decisions are considered as formality. We discussed, we agreed, so we trust each other. So the additional internal bureaucracy to write things down is seen as not necessary. So this informal way of approaching organizational procedures frequently leads to institutional discrimination when discriminatory actions become a part of the organizational culture. Thus, appraisals, assessments become very informal. Promotions might happen based on informal recommendations, word of mouth method is used in recruitment, and so on. And in such case, even if only some managers in the organization follow these informal practices, it is very likely to harm overall organizational climate about how fair and inclusive organization is as a whole. So what kind of organization or company we can consider to be the one which is inclusive and provides equal opportunities for everyone? Organization which has formal procedures and good practices to back up diversity management initiatives is likely to be taken more positively, but there is always a but. This is not always the case when it comes to the diversity management in a multinational corporation, again, due to the reasons we have discussed a moment ago. So consider the case of the Petrocom, one of your cases that you are going to solve. Petrocom was a proactive organization. Petrocom had policy for diversity management. Company was measuring procedures, had clear initiatives to follow, and so on and so forth. However, because of the differences in social evaluations across the countries and cultures, in Finland these activities were perceived negatively. Thus, when we see terminology with the labels such as negative organization or proactive organization, that doesn't yet mean that efforts of proactive organization will only be taken positively and will fit to every environment, especially if that organization is an MNC, which operates in multiple institutional environments. So these points are especially important to understand while designing and implementing diversity management policies and other initiatives. The way some group of people perceive certain things is a key, not the policy or initiative itself. When we know how people in specific contexts are likely to perceive our policy initiatives, we are able to make minor changes in the way we execute or communicate about it. So in company which has many subsidiaries, local adaptation may not be possible. This is likely to be very costly, but minor adjustments in communication or execution are always possible. And minor adjustments very frequently can make a huge change and bring big difference in the way the policy is taken. So having this in mind, let's look deeper at the concepts of fairness and equality and how they affect organizational decisions about diversity management. On one hand, in the inclusive organization, everyone should feel equal to each other, equally valued, equally appraised, equally given chance to develop and grow, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, fairness has large overall effect on the company. Consider McKinsey's study on employee perceptions about fairness. The study reported that 60% of respondents who perceived that performance management system was fair also stated the system is effective. So concepts such as fairness and equality do not only relate to the discussion of affirmative actions or sort of social well-being, but they also highly influence how employees in the organization evaluate effectiveness of the existing systems and procedures. So creating feeling of fairness in every organization is extremely important. But if making managerial decisions about it may be difficult because there exist large differences in what we consider to be fair and equal. There are two main perspectives on how to approach questions of fairness and equality at work, regardless whether we engage in diversity management because of social justice or business case. And these perspectives are grounded in human beliefs about what we consider to be equal and fair. These beliefs sort of further affect how we design various organizational procedures, HRM or human resource management practices, communication, and in general, how we treat diverse people in organizations. So let's discuss sameness perspective first, with guiding principle, equal treatment. If we believe in sameness perspective, we believe that intelligence, skills, and capabilities, emotions, etc., are not determined by persons' age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so on, but arise from persons' upbringing, experiences, socialization, and other contextual factors. Thus, diversity dimensions such as age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and others do not provide a ground for making any organizational decision. Very frequently, this perspective is supported by law, while seeking to support equal treatment of everyone in the organizations. So examples of practices under sameness perspectives could be like in the recruitment process, making sure that the same questions are asked for men, women, people of young and old age, or regardless of person's ethnic background. Another example, for example, could be ensuring that gender-specific language is not used in job advertisements, job descriptions, and other organizational documents. Or ensuring that same opportunities to work part-time and other company benefits are given for people of all genders, they identify with, regardless of their sexual orientation, their marital status, family status, or other type of partnership they're in. And one more example could be, for example, ensuring the same pay for the same job, regardless of any diversity factor. So on one hand, this approach looks as the best approach to manage diversity, but it fails in the situations when diversity should be considered while making decisions. So, for example, if we hire candidates based on the length of their professional work experience and we disregard gender, it is very likely that we may end up hiring more male candidates, because it is still much more frequent that women take larger responsibility in childcare and stay at home for maternity leave rather than men. This means that there is much more chance that due to maternity leave, many women candidates might have had shorter professional experience than men. So this approach also doesn't help to increase and manage diversity in the industries dominated by one type of social group. Consider the example, for example, men and women dominated industries with little ethnical diversity. It is also not very helpful while bringing in disabled people to work environment, right? That is why sameness perspective is frequently criticized for being oversimplistic view to handle diversity in the organizations. Now, difference perspective believes that differences should be taken into consideration when managers take decision or when organizational policies are designed. So, and it has sort of two branches, right? So the collectivistic strand argues that differences are associated with social groups to which person belongs. Thus, if organization disregards differences among these social groups, organization fails to create fairness at work. Examples of the special treatment according to social group membership could be like single-sex training schemes. Especially in technology and innovation-dominated industries, this is very important. For example, while organizing special coding training for women in order to create possibility for women placements in a wider range of positions, companies have opened a lot of opportunities and increased their possibilities to hire. Job advertisements aimed at encouraging applications from underrepresented groups could be another example for this. Or quotas for certain minority groups falls under this perspective as well. Assigning mentors and career sponsors from dominant group of people to the groups of minorities, right? So, for example, if management is dominated by men and they would like to encourage more women to become managers, so they would assign men higher level manager to mentor women. Also, smaller organizational practices fall under this category, such as having variety of food choices in the canteen in order to reflect different religious preferences, but also choices of life, like, for example, vegetarianism or veganism, gluten or dairy-free options, and so on and so forth. The negative side of this perspective is that sometimes, because of this special treatment, certain social group also gets unfair advantage, which causes tokenism, reverse discrimination, and other unwanted outcomes, right? Now, the other sort of strand or perspective of difference is individualistic strand, which emphasizes individuality of every person. People have unique strengths, weaknesses, abilities, and needs. And this strand seems to be somewhat closest to inclusive organization concept because it considers that diversity management is everyone's business in the organization, that everyone is diverse without any special focus on any dimension. In some cases, it is even used as a synonym for managing diversity. So here, the special treatment comes according to every individual needs. For example, instead of offering fixed menus in the canteen that we've just discussed, sort of to different religious preferences or choices of life, organization may offer flexible menus where everyone can tailor their plate content as they wish. Training and development plans could be designed for each individual personally. Also, unconscious biases and anti-stereotype training are given to managers under this perspective. Other examples could be engaging in organizational debate about diversity management with public and important stakeholders, or reevaluating and widening up criteria for promotion, designing greater range of career paths, and so on and so forth. However, this perspective has large limitations too, unfortunately. First, it ignores the basic needs of individuals to belong to a certain social group where they can easily identify themselves with. Also, it doesn't count the fact that despite all the trainings, individuals will not be entirely capable to understand the other, meaning that a man will never entirely understand what does it mean to be a woman and vice versa, or a person with a certain skin color will never understand what it's likely to be a person with another skin color. The same applies to sexual and orientation disability, parental status, and so on and so forth. So this organizational environment where we say that everyone is different, but no one really understands each other and no one really knows how much biases are still there, and where there's little official regulations on how to handle these biases might be dangerous. Thus, manager behavior and communication becomes essential in this setting. If organizational culture is inconsistent, there might be big challenges to have this working. In the industries where certain majority dominates, this approach may not be enough to create change towards diversity too. And also in the organizations where management is elected via democratic election system, for example, universities, it is likely that democratic elections will represent majority and majority's interests. So again, this approach has a minus. So no perspective about fairness or equality is perfect. What we choose or what we mix sort of those perspectives always depends on the context of the organization. So we should really see what matters for each specific organization and how to mix those perspectives up. It is always recommended to choose a combination of these perspectives when designing organizational policies, procedures, and practices. Inclusive organization can be created by choosing multiple practices from the perspectives of sameness and difference. So they work totally fine together. What is important is how we explain this to people, how we adjust our explanations depending on people or their subsidiary context or unit context, how individual managers are able to walk the talk or show their interest to handle team needs fairly. This will always be the key to how people within an organization feels, whether they feel excluded, included, differentiated, or assimilated. For example, we borrow a point from Collective Strand, and our organization decides to provide special training for certain diversified group, for example, women, disabled, ethnic minority, and so on. We have two different statements. So we state that option one, we do this to encourage you to make you feel a part of our company and with your unique background to gain skills needed to grow within the company and with the company. So that's sort of inclusive statement. Or consider the other option. We do this to be able to understand better people with disability, their needs, potential, and how our organization can support their integration in business environment. So this is more differentiating statement, if you remember those 4 approaches for diversity management from the previous lecture. So different statement about the same organizational practice or policy may create huge difference in how things are received and enacted. So not only organizational policy or practice, but how we present it, how we communicate it about it, will affect how diversified social groups or individuals will feel about their uniqueness and belongingness to the organization. Now, when having diversity management policy or any other diversity-related decision, it is very unlikely anyhow that that it will appear fair to everyone. That is why it is very important to address people's concerns, at least by listening to their position arguments, discussing with them how things could be improved. Even if nothing will be changed, but sincerely listening to somebody's concerns and suggestions already ease the tensions. Listening should be followed by explanation why certain decision was taken and providing clear argumentation behind it. If such argumentation is not available, then it's a good time to question on what basis decision was actually taken and whether decision is not biased. When people will be explained rationale behind the decision and will see the decisions that decisions were taken with careful consideration and the specific reasons behind it, even if people don't like that decision, they are likely to accept it, or at least sort of they won't be so much against it. That is why organizational tools such as survey about diversity policies and practices or workshops on diversity issues, even if they raise positive and negative points, are really important and frequently needed for the organization which wants to be inclusive. Inclusive manager behavior is essential too. So people should feel that organization is willing to discuss their concerns and adapt where needed, or make decisions at least which would be based on clear and logical reasons. Now, despite of that, none of the decisions are made in isolation, and managers who are making decisions about diversity management in the organization must learn, recognize, and evaluate the internal and external pressures, because all these pressures might adjust our perceptions of manager perspectives of what is fair and equal. So here you see the possible factors that are likely to influence organizational decisions about diversity management policies and practices. We discussed a lot about importance of recognizing and addressing issues related to manager beliefs and biases and values in the earlier lectures. Now we take example for example, social pressure. So recent study by Chang et al. About how social norms and scrutiny affect decisions about adding members of underrepresented populations, for example, women or racial minorities, to groups, provides a nice illustration of this factor, how it affects the perceptions of what is fair or not, and how the manager faces the pressures and their behavior is adjusted due to that. So these scholars analyzed 1,500 boards of listed companies in the US, where companies are this is a context where companies are continuously scrutinized about their diversity management initiatives. And US is also the place where companies face increasing pressure to increase gender diversity in the top management positions. And researchers observed that once company complied to social norm of having 2 women on the board, decision makers are discontinuously less likely to add a woman to the board, which means that decision makers' likelihood of adding a woman or minority to a group, for example, to a board of directors or top management team, is influenced by the descriptive social norms and scrutiny they face. Now, we discussed a lot about perceptions, about context, and other issues which make diversity management decisions and policies rather flexible. However, there are things that are considered as a must in diversity management policy and practices. It is recommended to have zero tolerance policy in the organization on several things. So these are, first of all, jokes about ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or religion. These are also slurs and name calling and bullying in the office and also virtually. An increasingly virtual environment within which organizational members operate more and more should be monitored in addition to issues that are happening in the office. Another aspect for zero tolerance is any kind of harassment. And also employees should be given instructions on how to safely report inappropriate behavior by co-workers or managers, in general, other organizational members, via formal complaint procedure. This is extremely tricky in small or closely tied organizations because in such environment, maintaining anonymity while solving the issues is complicated. And social environment frequently sort of pushes to remain silent rather than to raise the problem. Nevertheless, even in such environment, formal complaint procedure should be pushed forward. So these are the points I wanted to share with you about the decision-making aspects and how they influence policies, practices, and procedures related to diversity management in the organizations. We should always keep our eyes open and double check whether we have good reasons for decisions we made and what is the underlying rationale of our decisions. What are the main influences under which our decisions were made? So thank you and see you in the other lectures.